What is iNaturalist? You might have heard that term. If you haven't, it is kind of a neat thing. It's an online platform that was designed, believe it or not, by 3 college students as one of their master's degree projects. And it's ballooned from that point. They went to UC Berkeley, and now the Academy of Science has taken over the background and the database of all the information collected. But it's a couple different things, and one of them is it's a way to collect data either on your cell phone that connects to the online platform, or you can go back to your computer and upload data. And so by itself, it's just a collection of data, but it's also a little bit more than that. It allows people to create citizen science projects. And so it's a platform to utilize that data for different projects. And it's also a social media aspect. So a lot of different people with different backgrounds and different skill sets can sit and talk to each other and communicate back and forth. And so we're going to go ahead and kind of explore how you use it. Now, I mentioned citizen science term, and so I thought I'd spend a minute or so talking about what citizen science is. If you're not familiar with that term and you were to Google it and you look it up, there's all different definitions out there. They're all similar, but they're kind of different viewpoints or different ways to look at the same thing. So I thought I'd bring us all together, at least the way that I teach it. I'm also an adjunct professor at Webster University, and I teach a course on citizen science. And so one of the biggest terms that pops up a lot when you talk about citizen science is crowdsourcing. And by itself, it's not citizen science, but a lot of different citizen science projects use crowdsourcing. And it's pretty powerful because if you think about collecting data, there's only so much data one person could collect. And so having a large group of people to be able to help collect your data enables you to collect a larger data set. Anytime you ever gone on Facebook or any social media and you hit that like button or the thumbs up, that's crowdsourcing. It's collecting data all the way from all around the world many times. And so that's one of the powerful things that iNaturalist took control of, or at least the use of, is to be able to reach out to people all around the world use this platform. And so it's a great way to collect data, sometimes in a short snapshot or sometimes over years at a time. Another term that sometimes pops up when you hear the term citizen science is community-based monitoring. And what that is basically a community. And this one actually is a slide about actual different cancers that were popping up in North County, typically around Florissant and Ferguson area. And this one was the community noticed that a lot of people they grew up with actually had different cancers, that some of them were rare. And so they reached out on Facebook and started collecting the data, mapping it out. And so that brought in a lot of people from the EPA and other governmental sources that started looking at that data. So sometimes a citizen science reference is where it comes from, who was pushing for the data to be collected. In this case, it was a community. Sometimes you might have heard the word BioBlitz. And so we do a lot of these, at least I participate in a lot of these. And they're a biological inventory of a piece of property, kind of like a snapshot of what's living at a certain location. Forest Park does one if you ever get a chance to participate. And every other year, the Academy of Science also does one at Shaw Nature Preserve. But if you look around, a lot of times you'll see them posted. There's a lot of different places that offer the opportunity to meet a lot of different people like either myself or other scientists to go out and help collect data. Well, last term I'll go over is public participation in scientific research. And this is just a long term, but what it's referring to is a lot of citizen science projects are like a collaborative effort between either scientists that put together an actual project that has learning goals as well as scientific collection goals and standards for the data collection. But what they all have in common is this. There's usually a sponsoring organization, so somebody who developed a project or idea, and then volunteers who help collect and submit that data. And typically the original people who created the project may usually analyze that data. But there's all different kinds of levels of participation. So let's jump to iNaturalist and why it's important in different projects you could get involved in. So the basics of iNaturalist is pretty simple. The first thing you want to do is, well, you want to add an observation. So let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and jump. If you were to create it from the scratch, what would you do? Well, you need to do a couple things. So the first thing you would need to do is create an account. So if you don't have an account, it's pretty easy. You type in inaturalist.com and you're going to create, you just need an email address and create your own password. You could also log in with a Facebook account and use those credentials, or a Google account. So it's pretty simple to be able to use to set it up. And once you got it set up, it's going to look a little bit like this. So let me go ahead and show you my account. So once you log in, it's going to pop up inside, and depending on how many observations you have, it's kind of neat. There's a lot of different places to look, so I thought I would review some of these. So if you take a look, there's a couple little ribbons here of pull down menus. There's also one up top here you can go through. But the ones I wanted to point out is very much like Facebook or something like that. It has the social media aspect. So when you look at it, these are all the different projects and observations that I'm following, and I can go in and look at those things. This is my handle up here. I'm INaturalist. If you wanted to follow me, you can actually look me up in the program and see the observations I've collected. So your content is here. You can look at it. You can look at who you're following. Of course, you have a profile. And so you could go in and you can write a little blurb about yourself. You can share stuff about yourself. And it kind of gives you a little tab of your observations, how many species you've identified, identifications you've helped with, and things like that, and people you're following, or groups you're following, or projects you're following. But let's go ahead and let's jump to observations. And because once you make an account, the first thing you probably want to do is make observations. So let's go ahead and jump there. So if you look at it, it has a list of all the observations that I put in over time. And if you look over here, this is a little map, and you can zoom in and look around it, but these are all the observations. You can tell that I spend most of my time taking observations in St. Louis, although I've taken one way up here in Michigan on a trip. And if you look over here, it usually has them in order that they were put in. The last one I put in here was garlic mustard a couple days ago. And if you look over here all the way across, it kind of tells you where it's located, but it also tells you a couple things, and we'll go over it, but the ID. And so there's different levels of ID. This is research grade, which means I'd helped identify it, and then two other people came along and also agreed with me, and so now it's considered research grade. And because I have all the information I needed, such as a picture, like a media, it could be sound or picture, and I also had the location, date, and time, and other people agreed with me, it becomes a research grade. And so that's what your observations look like, and then they can belong to a project if somebody's looking for certain data, or you could create a project that you're trying to create. So let's go ahead and actually, let's add an observation. So I have a photo here I've not chosen before, but if you're online, you can download your photos from Google Photos, or if you attach your telephone to your desktop or a computer with a USB cord, you can also open up those pictures and add them that way. So let's go ahead, just like we were doing that. So here's a couple of photos we can go ahead and add. I'll choose one. Let's see. We'll go ahead and choose this one. So what happens is it creates a little tile in here, and you notice that the date and time and the location auto-filled. And that's because my photo that was taken on my cell phone, I had the GPS enacted, which means it was data stamped. And so it has the information already, so it auto-fills. If it did not autofill, like you took a photo on a camera, you can still use it, but all you would have to do is go in here and use a data picker and put in the right date, and you do the best that you can to remember where it was. And as far as here, you click on here, and you can move this around. If you didn't think this was in the right place, you could obviously move it around and click over here, and here's a new location, and you hit update. Now, if you take a look, you can also put a description if you want to add a few things. But of course, the biggest thing is we want some help identifying it. So if you click in this field, and this works best on Google Chrome browser. If you do this on Edge, sometimes it doesn't work as well. But what it'll do is it automatically generates what it thinks based on your photo, what the closest family group or genus, which is up here. So it's a trillium. We may not know what kind, so maybe that's where we stop. We would choose this one if we can't go any further. But typically it's going to generate what it thinks are the top 10 possible identifications, and the top one is usually the one they think is the most similar to. And you can go through and you can compare each one and look at it. I just happen to know that this one is a prairie trillium, and so I would just click prairie trillium. But if you want to view it, it'll pop up here, and I can actually read about it. I can look if it's been found in my area, and all kinds of information around what it thinks it might be. And so these are the observations of prairie trillium around my area. So obviously there's a bunch that has happened in this area. There's other people, for example, you could reach out to these people and see where they've identified them, or you could reach out and ask them a question how to identify it. But let's go ahead and we'll choose that. So if I choose that, it auto fills in here, and all I would have to do is hit submit one observation. It's going to save it, and it's going to pop it up. And it becomes one of your observations. And when it comes live, and we'll see a live account in a minute, you can see observations being put up every couple seconds, which is kind of neat. But let's go ahead, and we're going to jump right back to our presentation. So what is an observation? So the best way to think about it is typically any organism that you encounter that you can photograph, and it does include evidence. So it could be scat or bones or something like that. Now, typically bones are sometimes hard to identify, but you can put those up as observations. But the most important thing is you want, if you can, get a photo of something. and you need the date and time and location, and those things together make a decent observation. Now, there's a couple of things to remember when you are taking photos. One of the neatest things, you can use your cell phone, and you can download the app on your cell phone from whatever store that you would need, depending if you're an iPhone or an Android. But you would walk up, and you can either do this one, take the photo without opening the app, or you can open the app and take the photo within the app. Either one works. But you take a photo. If you have the app open, one of the nicest things you can do is, of course, you have the option of taking the photo right there in the app. You could choose the image if you already took it before on your cell phone, and you could just upload that photo. You also have the option, which is a new one, which is to choose a sound if you have one recorded on your phone, or you can record one right there. You can put observations up without a photo. The only thing to remember, if you put something up without a photo, it'll never become a research grade because there's no way to actually say it was or was not correct identification, but that is an option. Now, one of the nice things about cell phones, which is neat, one, it's going to pop it up here and you can add multiple photos. What I recommend is that you put a couple photos. Plants are a good example. If you put a photo of the leaf, the flower, and a stem, if it's a tree or something like that, when people go to help identify it, they have multiple pictures to look at. The auto picture program that's built into iNaturalist only uses that first photo, and that's why it's labeled here as the first one. So whatever you choose as that first one, that's what it's going to try to identify for you. And then you take a look, and all the information is filled in. There's a couple of things I wanted to point out here. In the middle screen, hopefully you can see it, but there's a couple options as far as visibility. Visibility, you can choose if you wanted to, whether or not everybody in the world can see it, the public. You can also make it private. And you also have obscure, which means people can tell what county or city it may be in, but not the exact location. So if you're around your house or something like that, you could choose the options of obscure, so they can't tell it was from your yard, but they could tell general vicinity of where it was found. Once again, just like online, you have a couple options here and you can choose. But one of the coolest things is this feature. You can click this little button and it'll enable you on a cell phone to actually compare your photo with other photos and information. You can go through and compare them right on your phone, try to make a good decision of what it might be. Once you think of what it is, just like online, you click OK, and it's going to jump up and you upload the photo and you're good to go. So a couple do's and don'ts about taking photos. We do recommend you take test photos, label as test. That way, if they pop up, somebody doesn't try to identify them. And then go back and delete your test photos. You have the option of deleting any of your observations. And take a lot of photos of weeds and things around there. They may be invasive, but that's good because we can learn where some of the invasive species may be. If you happen to take a photo of something that you know is kind of a captive, like planted or something like that, there's a little button in there you can toggle it and then actually label it as a cultivated plant, something we know that's been planted. Some things that they don't want you to do in iNaturalist is don't take pictures of house plants and stuff like that. We typically know what those are. You don't take pictures of people. One, it violates people's rights, and we don't want people's photos up there. Hands are okay. Most of my photos, because I go out catching frogs, have my hands in them. But we don't want photos of faces. And don't use other people's photos. Don't go on the internet and pull up a photo and put it in there. You'd want to use your own photos. So those are some basic do's and don'ts. Where I wanted to review a couple safety tips. So because of stuff going on with COVID-19, we recommend that typically, excuse me, you collect data from around your house or apartment or neighborhoods is your first choice if you cannot get out to a park or something like that. Some of the parks are opening up. This is a picture actually of me and my son actually collecting slugs, I think, in our front garden. So there's still a lot of great wildlife around our houses, a lot of pollinated insects and things that you can still take photos of, and they're great observations. If it is safe and you know places to go, a couple things to point out, safety tips, is check and review local health guidelines of where you can go. Look up what parks are open. If you do go to a park, try to choose one where there's not a lot of people. If you pull up, there's a lot of people, maybe go to another park just for safety to make sure you're not around a lot of people. Stay in small groups. And if you need to, wear a mask or something like that. And try to keep that 6 foot distance away from other people. When you get home, just remember to wash your hands in case you happen to touch something that other people could have touched. And keep those in mind if you happen to go out to a local place or a park with the current conditions that are going on. Now, I wanted to end a little bit about projects and highlight a couple. And so what projects are all those observations put together for a common purpose. And so they may be trying to collect data. One we did at the zoo, which was neat, is right outside the butterfly dome. We wanted to find out how many pollinators could utilize a little space right outside. And believe it or not, we had around, and we keep having more than this, we had about 524 observations. But what the most important thing is how many different species. We identified around 222 different species in a tiny little garden. So that shows you that it doesn't always take a massive area to attract a lot of different diversity of animals. Now, there's a couple kinds of projects. Typically, most projects are considered collection project, collection of different observations. An umbrella project is when you put a bunch of these collection projects together. So you could have, for example, all the amphibian projects of each state. An umbrella project would be, all the amphibians of the entire United States pulled together. It pulls all those projects together. So those are two kinds of projects that you typically will see on iNaturalist. One of them that I wanted to point out, something that I'm involved in, how we've used it in different ways. I have a project called Turtle Road Watch, and so we use iNaturalist as the platform to collect data about turtle road mortality around the St. Louis region for a couple of reasons. One, we're trying to find out what's happening to our turtles, and we're looking for a couple things. One, we're trying to look where all these guys are moving around, what roads have the highest areas of, unfortunately, mortality, or where they're crossing the roads. So hopefully in the future, we could do something to help save some of our turtles. And we're looking for what we call the hot spots and hot moments. So these are the places that, unfortunately, either because of where the habitat is on one side or the other, they cross a lot, and the timing when these guys move the most. And typically in our area, about May is the peak when a lot of turtles start to move around. You see a lot of, unfortunately, turtles on the road. Now, the last project I wanted to invite you guys to join about, I'm going to go ahead and play this short little video. You might need to turn down your sound just a little bit when it plays, so be ready if it's too loud.
Welcome to the 2020 City Nature Challenge. Our focus as we celebrate Earth Day's 50th anniversary with the world community. Now more than ever, we need to study nature in cities around the globe. We can't fully protect nature on this planet without studying what is living in cities. Using cameras and smartphones, tens of thousands of people will observe wildlife in their home cities from April 24th through April 27th, contributing to an international database of urban wildlife that will be used by scientists and naturalists to help understand nature in our cities and work to make them a better place for humans and wildlife. Now, it's your chance to get involved. Just imagine how many observations we can all make together. Go to citynaturechallenge.org, then take pictures of wildlife and upload them to a global database using iNaturalist or your city's preferred platform. Watch as experts all over the world help to identify your observations. Join the 2020 City Nature Challenge or follow along and see how we can work together to change the world.
So hopefully you're a little excited about collecting data, and we've participated, our city has participated in at least about 3 years. And it was really neat to see it start within 2 cities and spread across the world now. People participate all over the place. Sometimes I'm kind of jealous because you can look at the observations, which is neat, from other countries and what they're finding during the same window as we are collecting data. And sometimes I'm jealous because sometimes you might see whales, depending on where they live, cheetahs and stuff like that. But we still have really great wildlife. And so here is a little snapshot of our project. And if you look on here, when I posted this, it was 24 days ago, and it started today. And so let's go ahead and actually take a look while we're here. Let's take a look and see how we are doing, because people have already been collecting observations. So let's see. I checked at lunchtime, and I think we were just under 1,000. Looks like we are about 1,100 observations already in our city. And so this is a great project to get involved in, and all you need to do is have an iNaturalist account and start taking photos. The way this project was set up, and I'll just slide it down here, you can also see the most observations. So if you get up here and you have a lot of observations, your name will pop up there. But if you take a look down this little map right here, anything that's taken within this vicinity, which includes St. Louis City, St. Louis County, and all the surrounding counties that touch it, if your photo is taken sometime between today and the end of the day on Monday, it'll become part of this project. And so you'll help us collect all that awesome data. And so you can see all the different data that's up there. These are just some of the recent ones you could scroll through. So go ahead. I hope you want to participate in this particular project. I'm going to go ahead and jump to here. So this year is no longer a competition, but one of the neat things about this one is we're just trying to collect as much data in a snapshot in the next 4 days and see what we can get. So hopefully you guys want to go participate. If not, hopefully you might utilize iNaturalist and help collect data for the city, because we do look at all the observations for the whole year and gives us a great snapshot of different species and the biodiversity that's here in our city. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up. We'll take a look at the question and answers and see if anybody has any questions I might be able to answer. So let me go ahead and we'll see. All righty. So it looks like we don't have any questions. So if you have any, if you want to ask them now, I'll go give you a minute or so to ask a few questions. I'll take a look too in the chat and see if any questions end up over there. So what do you do when you know an iNatural suggestion is off base? So once you have an account, one of the things you can do is flag it. You can also go in and disagree with the observation itself. And so you have to have so many people agree. You can also flag it as something that doesn't belong. You can put an observation note on there. There's a couple different things inside the settings you could do, especially if it's something that's not there. Sometimes I've seen people take pictures of rocks and think it's an animal. So you can definitely go in and do that as well. Somebody asked a good question. I took a picture of a locust and it didn't suggest that at all. It happens quite a bit, and a lot of times it's the photo program that helps is not as accurate as people. And so sometimes it might misidentify the background or something like that. Sometimes it also depends on how many photos of a locust has been put in there. To give you a quick example of something, the American burying beetle, which is something the zoo has been working on raising and hopefully releasing in the wild. One of the things we noticed is when we took a picture of an American burying beetle, which is easy to identify, the program could not. And the reason was that it didn't have enough correctly identified photos. And so in the field, we started photographing them when we found them in the field. And after we had so many photos in there, it started to recognize, because it's a program that learns. And so it has to recognize the digital image correctly. And so sometimes if you're not sure what it is, you can reach out to other people on iNaturalist and they can help you identify it. And it happens quite a bit. If you saw something last week and photographed it, can it be used? If the date time frame that it was taken, it can be used in iNaturalist overall, but it may not make the City Nature Challenge. The City Nature Challenge actually fits within the window of today to Monday. And somebody said they noted what kind of locust. That's excellent. It looks like we have a couple Q&A I'll try to answer. I haven't used iNaturalist before, but I have the app. If I click observe, take a photo, how do I make sure it goes towards the City Nature Challenge? You don't actually have to join the project of City Nature Challenge. Anything that is taken in the window, unless you mark it as private, your observation automatically fits in the parameters of the project, so it'll become part of the project. If you wanted to, you can add City Nature Challenge into your list of projects that you follow. And when you take the photo, you could also tag it as that part of that photo, but it automatically will become part of City Nature Challenge. So one says, how can you see on the app other observations of the same thing I post? That is one way. I wasn't going to cover it in here, but if you were to go to the, I'll show you real quick. Give me a second. I'll share my screen. Let's jump in here. Hold on. So if you were going to go in here, there's a couple of things you could do. And it gets a little more complicated, but if you were going here and to identify, you can look at observations and you can actually sort out different animals. And so if you wanted to identify stuff, you can hit up here at the top, says identification. You could put in the species that you wanted to. So you could put in something simple as gray tree frog. Oops, sorry, can't spell. So you could go ahead and look at gray tree frog and it'll pull up all the observations. You could also go in filters and you have a whole list. You can put in date and time. So you could sort out and look at just what you want to do. So you could also sort out by project, or you could sort out by animals. There's lots of different filters in here if you want to look at things that you want to look at, very specific things. And that's a very, very good question. Let me see if anybody has any additional questions here. And we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. And if you have any additional questions, we're going to put a poll at the end here. If you guys could take it, it'd be great, and let us know what you thought of the program. When we post this actual recording of this particular webinar, we'll put some links of other resources where you could go to try to answer some of those questions. And let's see. So it looks like 2 groups popped up when I searched Metro in St. Louis. I believe that as long as it says St. Louis 2020, it will be our project. If you look, there may be a date differently on the Metro one. I think it was last year's. But we'll go ahead and end the program there. And if you have any questions, you can also, since it's a small group, you can also reach out to me, Dawson, D-A-W-S-O-N, at stlzoo.org, and I'll do my best to answer them when I'm back at work. Thank you, guys.